Alright, let's talk about all the damn palettes that I bought in 2018. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. How is it going? So it is almost the end of the year and I was planning on doing this video. I actually attempted filming this video once before and I just wanted to do like quick little snapshot reviews of all the palettes that I bought in the year 2018. However, I think last week or the beginning of this week Melissa posted a video where she did something similar, but she actually ranked her palette. I'm going to leave her video in the description box below because you should definitely check it out and you should definitely follow Melissa because she's amazing. Let me start off by saying that 2018 was definitely the year that I went completely bananas trying new eyeshadow formulas. It was just one of those things that was like a little snowball effect. I wanted to try a variety of brands and then I fell in love with a couple of the brands, so I wanted to purchase more of their palettes. It was pure insanity. Going into 2019, I definitely want to slow down. I'm not doing low buys or no buys because I don't think that that's necessary for me and I don't really feel like it's something that I would enjoy doing. But that being said, I still want to slow down and I want to enjoy the products that I have purchased already because I think there's so much more to get out of them. So one of the ways I'm going to do this is I'm going to start the Project 5 Wears series on my channel. This is also modeled on a video that I've seen Melissa do, which was a Project 10 Wears. Now Project 10 Wears sounds like a lot of commitment, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do Project 5 Wears, where basically I pick a different palette and I do 5 looks with it. I'm not going to do tutorials because that's a lot of work and I've had the experience recently that people just don't really care for tutorials much, so I'm not going to do tutorials. I'm basically going to tell you what I did for each of these looks. So hopefully these videos will not be too long and you might still be able to get inspiration from them if you own these palettes. In addition to that, I'm going to try to do several collaborations with this series. I already am hoping that Amber will agree to do a collab with me on Juvia's Place because she now has Juvia's Place palettes, and I think it would be really awesome if we did a collab with our Juvia's Place palettes. Anyway, let's not go off on too many tangents because this video is going to be long as it is. So, the grand total of palettes that I purchased this year comes up to 20. However, I'm going to only rank 19 of those palettes because the 20th palette that I purchased this year literally just arrived, and that is the Tribe palette from Juvia's Place. It's an eyeshadow palette with greens. Of course I was going to buy it. So, this palette just arrived. Obviously I will not be able to rank it nor talk about it in a review style fashion, so we're going to leave this for a first impressions video maybe in the beginning of next year, or you are definitely going to see it in a Project 5 Wears. So the rest of the palettes I have basically ranked in like an ascending order, so you're going to see them from lowest rated to highest rated, and I'm going to try to keep the rambling per palette as short as possible. Let's get started. Okay, at the bottom of the bottom of my list is the VISEART Petit Pro 3 palette. There's nothing wrong with this palette. I don't dislike the quality or the color story or anything of the sorts. I just don't feel like this palette impressed me enough for me to reach for it a lot, to be excited about it and to use it often. Honestly, since I bought it, I don't think I've reached for it again, which is a shame because the mattes in here are really beautiful. The reason I don't reach for this palette is the shimmers. VISEART shimmers are just not my cup of tea. So while I think the mattes are beautiful, the color story of this palette is absolutely amazing, especially in such a small format. Unfortunately, I don't like the shimmers and that's the reason I never reach for this palette, and I am probably going to declutter it and give it to someone who's going to enjoy it more because this is definitely not my palette. So, nothing wrong with VISEART, and I'm so sorry for all of you who are VISEART fans out there. Don't be mad at me, it's just the way it is. Another palette that there's nothing wrong with the quality, the color story or the palette itself, that is the 10-year anniversary palette from Kat Von D, which I don't use because I'm currently mad at Kat Von D and unfortunately also her products. So while I hope to get much more use out of this palette next year when I'm going to, you know, try to let go of my feelings for Kat Von D and just enjoy the makeup I haven't really been reaching for this palette much. I didn't really develop the strong relationship that I have to the Metal Matte palette with this one because I just didn't have the time to fall in love with it. Shortly after the release of this palette, Kat Von D announced she's an ignorant moron, and ever since she lays in a drawer and she isn't being used. Did I mention the places, by the way? Okay, I mentioned that I have 19 palettes, however, we're starting at number 17 because some of these palettes I feel like are so close to each other that I just put them on the same level, on the same spot. That's why the ranking has 17 palettes, but I'm going to talk about a grand total of 19. At the number 15, which is not very high on my list, unfortunately ends a palette that I did not expect would end this low on my list. There are several reasons why the PALEO palette from Clionadh Cosmetics isn't ending up much higher on my list, and that is that I discovered Pat McGrath and Juvia's Place this year. I purchased quite a lot of palettes from these two brands, and I love these palettes much more than I love this palette. And that's why it's ending up so low on the ranking. The second reason is that I just find myself wanting more. I did not fall head over heels for this palette, and one of the reasons is again that the shimmers in this palette, oh sorry, let me open it so that you can actually see how it looks like on the inside. The shimmers in this palette are a little bit more subtle for my taste, and so are the duochromes. Just in case you didn't know that this is a hand painted palette, so it is an absolutely beautiful piece of art, and the color story is actually really pretty, and some of these colors are really nice. The overall quality is great, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with the quality of these eyeshadows. It's just that they lack the punch of Pat McGrath and Juvia's Place eyeshadows, and that is why they are ending up a little bit lower on my list. At the 14th position we have another palette that I don't find anything wrong with, and it's a palette that I truly enjoy using. It's just that it's kind of a small monochromatic palette that I don't get overly excited for, and that is the Sassy Siennas from Douce of Colors. Let me say that this is the first product from Douce of Colors that I actually really enjoy. I've previously owned Douce of Colors products that unfortunately I didn't like and I had to declutter. Side note. This is a really beautiful quintet of matte eyeshadows. The reason I'm not super excited about it and why it's fairly low on my list is because, first of all, this is an all matte eyeshadow palette and I never do all matte looks. So I use this as a companion palette mostly to my ColourPop eyeshadows or to my single eyeshadows. So while I love the quality and I really enjoy reaching for this palette, it's not a palette that I, you know, get joyous and overly excited about. So I like this palette. I highly recommend trying these little quintets from Douce of Colors if you are into any of the color stories of those. But yeah, I consider them mostly companion palettes rather than standalone exciting palettes. At the number 13 we have my lowest rated Juvia's Place palette, and that is the Juvia's Place Douce palette. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this palette. It's a beautiful piece of candy that, you know, when I open it I can immediately tell you that my first association is French macarons. I don't know if I felt the need to say that with a French accent. I immediately feel like I'm looking at French macarons when I open this palette. Juvia's Place intended for this palette to be a more pastel candy version of their, you know, more punchy eyeshadows. These eyeshadows are beautiful. The reason I'm ranking this lowest on my list is just because I don't really reach for pastels, I feel like, that often. I do love this white duochrome pink, this absolutely gorgeous orchid shade, the metallic mint shade, this pink over here. It's a really nice palette, there's nothing wrong with it. I just don't feel like it's a palette that excites me a lot. Number 12 is my Anastasia Beverly Hills Norvina palette. This is a beautiful, gorgeous eyeshadow palette. There's absolutely nothing I can say about the quality of these eyeshadows or even the color story that I dislike. Truly, if I had started collecting Anastasia Beverly Hills eyeshadow palettes this year and I had the option to not buy the Modern Renaissance palette, I would have much rather bought this as my Anastasia neutral palette because this is much more me. I've never really had a problem with the Anastasia Beverly Hills mattes, and even though these mattes are not like the mattes in the Subculture palette which everyone hated, they're just the regular pigmented but blendable Anastasia Beverly Hills mattes. So this row over here is absolutely gorgeous, but what I want to pay compliments to Anastasia for is this top row of eyeshadows over here. I feel like ABH has really stepped up their metallic eyeshadow formula this year, because ever since Soft Glam in the beginning of the year, they've just been killing it with the metallic eyeshadows. This whole top row here has this new formula and it is absolutely incredible. These are neutrals with enough punch to make you excited for neutrals. If there was ever a neutral eyeshadow palette that I would get really excited to use on a daily basis, it would probably be Norvina. At number 11 we have the Juvia's Place Afrique palette. This is one of their also newer releases. It is a beautiful eyeshadow palette where you have a combination of like warmer shades as well as very colorful matte shades. I think this is a welcome addition into the lineup of Juvia's Place because I feel like they were really missing more colorful matte eyeshadows. The reason I'm not ranking this higher is first of all because I love my other Juvia's palettes that I'm going to show you later more, and because a lot of these are, especially on like the neutral warmer side, they're nothing exciting. They're things that I've seen before and things I know that Juvia's Place can do well. Their metallic formula is outstanding, but it's been ever since I think the release of the brand, because I haven't had a Juvia's Place eyeshadow palette where the metallics weren't killing it. The mattes are also a really good formula, and I'm happy to say that their colorful eyeshadows are also a really good matte eyeshadow formula. I bought this palette mainly because of those colorful mattes, because I think they're going to pair really well with other Juvia's Place palettes. So I don't really view this palette as like one complete palette that excites me much. I picked this up mostly as a companion to my other Juvia's Place palettes, which is why it's ranked a little bit lower than some of my other Juvia's Place palettes. That being said, I think this is a beautiful little palette. I love the size of it. I love the pen sizes of these eyeshadows. Alright, and now we are actually moving into the top 10, where I feel like the most exciting palettes for me personally are. The first one that I want to show you is another Juvia's Place palette, and that is the Nubian 2 palette, which looks like this. I don't know why I love this palette so much. I don't know if it's because of this gorgeous green shade over here, which I've talked about so many times, or the whole combination of colors. I just really like this eyeshadow palette. The mattes are beautiful. They're, again, what Juvia's likes to do a lot, and just stuff their palettes with warm neutrals, which is why I think the Afrique palette was such a welcome addition to their lineup. I really like this bronzy shade here. I love the metallic orange. Yeah, there's just something very cozy and familiar about the color story of this palette, which is why I really like it, and which is why it is one of my favorite Juvia's Place palettes. I love my Nubian 2 palette, even if it doesn't have the most exciting color story in the world. Okay, and now at the number 9 we have two palettes, because one of them is actually not an eyeshadow palette, technically speaking. So the two palettes that I have at the 9th position are my Makeup Addiction Cosmetics palettes, and those are the Meadow and the Holy Glow Fantasy. Now, the Meadow palette is technically the eyeshadow palette, because the other thing is considered a highlighter palette, but because I use it as an eyeshadow palette, I included it in this video, and it is also the reason that it ends up at the same position as the Meadow palette, because I don't have more feelings for it one way or the other. I really enjoyed trying Makeup Addiction Cosmetics this year. This eyeshadow palette doesn't have a lot of mattes. There are only 3 mattes in here, but I really enjoy these mattes. They're soft, they're buildable, they're pigmented. There's nothing wrong I can say about them. I really love the shimmers of Makeup Addiction Cosmetics. They are just as punchy, just as smooth, and just as beautiful on the eye as the shimmers of the Juvia's Place eyeshadow palettes. The reason I love this palette so much is because this bronze is absolutely beautiful. So moving into the top 10, I may actually swatch a couple of shades. This shade here is like a beautiful slate blue, goldish green type of duochrome. Kudos to Makeup Addiction Cosmetics for including such a beautiful and unique shade in its pressed eyeshadows, and especially in a palette. I think this is a very unique color story. You can do so much with it, and while the mattes don't give you a lot of freedom to experiment with different color combinations, I still feel like you can create a lot of looks just using this palette, and I don't mind pulling another palette to complete this one with, just because I love all the colors in here so much. Like I said, the other palette is technically not an eyeshadow palette. This is the Holy Glow Fantasy palette, which contains highlighters. I would not use either of these as highlighters because they're going to be too dark for my face. The formula on these is, I feel like, a little bit thinner compared to the one in the Meadow palette, but I think that makes sense given these are considered to be highlighters. They probably need to have somewhat lighter formula to be applied on the eyes. That being said, if you use a glitter glue or you spritz them with Fix Plus, they're going to apply just as punchy as the one in the Meadow palette. And the rest of this ranking basically consists of mostly Pat McGrath eyeshadow palettes, because probably it's not going to come as a surprise to any of you that I ranked my Pat McGrath palettes the highest. They are just my new love, my babies, the crown jewels of my collection. Okay, so at the number 8 I have one of the Opulence collection palettes, and that is the Mothership Sublime Bronze Temptation palette. The only reason I've ranked this palette the lowest is not because I don't like the colors in it or the color story. I think this is a beautiful color story, but if I have to be completely honest with you, there are half of the shades in this palette are not super exciting. You have two matte browns and this champagne color over here. That being said, the quality of these is absolutely amazing, and also I think my favorite shade from all three is in this palette, and that is this absolutely beautiful reddish bronzish duochrome. This is the shade Corruption. Everyone lost their panties over this eyeshadow, and that is totally understandable. Knowing me, you can already anticipate that this green shade here is also one of my favorites. The metallic formula of Pat McGrath is impeccable. There's nothing, you know, negative I can say about it. Especially if you use glitter glue, these shades are always going to pop. But I think they're so impactful on their own that you don't even necessarily need to use glitter glue. So at the number 8 we had the Pat McGrath Bronze Temptation palette. At the number 7 we have the Mothership Subversive Metalmorphosis palette, which is the pink palette. This is a palette that contains only metallic shades, and it looks like this. The color story of this is not very unique, but I still like it a little bit more than the red Opulence palette, just because I enjoy more colors in this palette than I enjoy in the other palette, because the only color that I really don't enjoy in this palette is this one over here, the silver shade, and that is a absolutely personal preference. I just don't like to wear silvers. I even think this shade here, the sort of beigey shade, is really beautiful, especially if you put it on the eye. It doesn't look very exciting when you look at it in the pan, but honestly if you put it on the eye, I feel like it has very unique undertones to it, and I always really enjoy using this shade, even though theoretically it's a boring beige. I was actually wearing this eyeshadow palette in my makeup that I shouldn't have bought video, and I feel like a lot of people really liked this makeup look, and I just really like this palette. Even though it's full of fairly boring neutralish type of colors, I still feel like the combination of colors is really nice, the formula is really beautiful, and I think the you can do a lot with only this palette, even though it contains technically no mattes. Surprisingly, at the number 6 and the highest rated Opulence collection eyeshadow palettes from me personally is the blue one, that is the Mothership Subliminal Dark Star palette. When I bought this set, I actually expected that it will be exactly the other way around, that the red palette will be my favorite and this one will be my least favorite. However, it turns out that I really like this palette, because this is a color story that I normally wouldn't really appreciate. There is a grey, there is a black, and there is a gold and a champagne. Theoretically, this should have been my least favorite palette from the Opulence collection set, but I find myself really enjoying it and pulling it out quite often to do looks with it. I love this grey shade over here. I do like greys quite a bit, especially if they're done well, and this is a very beautiful grey with strong blue undertones to it. Obviously everyone's favorite is this gorgeous duochrome purple blue shade here. Let's swatch it. That is the shade Interstellar, which is absolutely gorgeous. You're going to be surprised to hear that I actually really enjoy the black shade in this palette, because I feel like there is something different in the formula of this black compared to the blacks in the big Mothership palettes. I feel like it's more saturated, it has a little bit more of a satin sheen to it, and it blends so beautifully, and there is just something about the formula of this black that is not like any other black that I have tried. Okay, the shared 5th position goes to two Pat McGrath palettes, the Mothership 5 Bronze Seduction and the Mothership 1 Subliminal palettes. The reason I'm ranking these eyeshadow palettes at the same place is not only because I love them equally, but because if I look at them, they're like the two polar opposites that kind of balance each other. On the one hand you have the Subliminal, which is extremely cool toned, and on the other hand you have Bronze Seduction, which is extremely warm toned, and then you have thrown in the special topper shades in the mix, and I don't know, I just love these palettes equally. The reason I really enjoy the Subliminal palette, even though I didn't expect to enjoy it much, is because, well, first of all, the topper shades obviously, but second of all, normally I don't like cool toned eyeshadows and I don't like how cool toned eyeshadows look on me. However, for some very odd reason, these cool toned eyeshadows work even on me and they don't make me look like the corpse bride. They are absolutely beautiful. I love warm toned eyeshadows, so for me the Bronze Seduction was a no-brainer. Not gonna lie though, of course, the topper shades are where it's at for me. I especially love this eyeshadow here, the Astral Luna Gold. This eyeshadow is absolutely phenomenal. I don't think I've ever come across anything quite so sparkly and so beautiful and so unique. So To me, these palettes are equally beautiful and equally gorgeous. Going forward into the big mothership palettes, by the way, the quality of the eyeshadows in these is absolutely incredible. Even the shimmers, like the more satin formula, can be used as transition shades because they blend out beautifully. Once on the skin, they blend out so beautifully that you can get away with using a shimmer on your crease and not look crazy. Okay, at the fourth position we have my first foray into Juvia's Place, which is the Magic palette. I absolutely love this palette because first of all it made me fall in love with the Juvia's Place formula, and second of all I think this is one of the best Juvia's Place color stories just because there is such a nice variety of warm toned eyeshadows and cool toned eyeshadows. Everything has beautiful formula, especially the metallics. Needless to say that this green over here has my heart. I wasn't really sure quite what to expect from Juvia's Place when I ordered this palette. I had heard a lot of good things about it, but for one reason or the other I didn't really think I would be that impressed. This is the eyeshadow palette that showed me that Juvia's Place is definitely a brand I should be trying more from. Anywho, at the third position we have the Xuri palette from Xuri Cosmetics. I absolutely love this palette. I had so much pleasure using it this past year. Xuri Cosmetics is a UK-based indie brand, which is also a black-owned brand. I absolutely love this eyeshadow palette. First of all, because it's such a poppy, beautiful, tropical fruit, warm-toned eyeshadow palette. I think this is a beautiful formula, even if the metallics are not the type of metallics that I like to wear. The mattes in this palette are super soft and super blendable. The shimmers, even though they're not my favorite formula for shimmers because they're not as foiled as say the Juvia's formula, are still absolutely gorgeous on the eyes, and because they have a bit more of that like satin finish to them, I think you can definitely use them in the crease and they will be very forgiving that way as well. What can I say? I absolutely love this eyeshadow palette and I can't wait to see what Xuri will do next year. I'm secretly hoping for something with blues and greens. At the second position we have the Mothership 3 Subversive palette, which is actually my second favorite color story from Pat McGrath and from the big Mothership palettes. I love Subliminal and Bronze Seduction, but if you look at the non-topper shades, the color stories of those are pretty boring, whereas here I feel like even within the non-topper shades you get quite a lot of variety of colors. So you get this beautiful purple over here, you get this beautiful gunmetal bluish type of color, this beautiful chocolate brown, and then you have of course also within the topper shades so much beautiful colors. I did hesitate quite a bit picking up this palette, not for any other reason but because essentially I'm buying it not even for 10 but for 8 shades, because the black shade and this Astral Ghost Orchid shade are also in the Sublime palette. So unfortunately I feel like, especially for people who collect Pat McGrath eyeshadow palettes, there is so much repetition, so I really feel like Pat should switch it up a little bit. But that being said, I still love the color story of this palette. This goldish green over here is absolutely phenomenal. Look at that, look how gorgeous. And then we have that shade over here which is called VR Pink, which is absolutely freaking stunning. So second spot definitely goes to the Subversive from Mother Pat. Let me put her away. And now drumroll please. The first place is actually a shared position because I couldn't pick which one of these palettes I loved more. They're actually not from the same brand. The first co-shared position goes to the Mothership 2 Sublime from Pat McGrath Labs and the SAHARAN 2 from Juvia's Place. I love these palettes equally. I absolutely adore both of them. They have a special place in my heart, and that's why they share the first position. So the SAHARAN 2 is absolutely without a doubt my favorite Juvia's Place palette. It may seem quite surprising because the color story doesn't seem all that exciting if you look at it, but I promise you, if you actually pick up this eyeshadow palette and you try the different colors and the combination of colors, you will fall in love. Not to mention that these metallics, I don't know what is up with the metallics in this particular palette, but they feel even more creamy, even more glittery, and even smoother than the ones in her other palettes. So there's something very magical about the SAHARAN 2 palette, and I have feelings for this palette, which is why it is at the number 1 position for this year, shared with, of course, my beautiful foray into Pat McGrath Labs, which is the Mothership 2 Sublime palette. This eyeshadow palette is definitely my favorite from all of the Pat McGrath palettes that I own for several reasons. First of all, because it was my very first eyeshadow palette from Pat McGrath and I am a sentimental sap like that. Second of all, because I love the color story of this palette. I think there is just such a beautiful combination of colors. You have this orange here, you have this purpley reddy shade here, you have the absolutely gorgeous toppers, and there is a green. Look how beautiful that is. And of course, I cannot not swatch VR Nectar because I want to put VR Nectar over top of everything. It is, I want to say, maybe my favorite shade in this palette. And because we're ending this video with a Pat McGrath Labs palette, I just want to throw in a couple of thoughts that I've been having about my whole Pat McGrath Labs eyeshadow palette experience. First of all, owning these eyeshadow palettes has taught me that there is not only combination of colors, but also combination of textures. I did not before ever experience an eyeshadow palette that motivated me so much to combine things, to layer them, and to, you know, experiment with different textures over top of each other. So layering and trying out different textures together is something that I definitely learned from Pat. Even though I love the metallic eyeshadow formula of a lot of other brands, you know, Juvia's Place, Makeup Addiction Cosmetics, Anastasia Beverly Hills, I feel like Pat's eyeshadows have a complexity to them. A complexity and depth that you can only appreciate when you put it on your eyes and you kind of experience that, whoa, this looked like a simple purple magenta eyeshadow, but then you put it on your eyes and it's like, there is just depth to it. And the last thing I wanted to mention, and something that I've thought about recently, you know how I always said that I would like to have an eyeshadow palette, like one of her big eyeshadow palettes, or even a small one for that matter, with only her topper shades. I've come to realize that first of all, that's never going to happen, and second of all, I don't want that anymore. Because I think that these eyeshadow palettes are meant to be consumed as a combination of different textures. Because you have foiled metallics here, you have satin sheen metallics here, you have matte, and you have these glittery shades. And they are meant to work together. Pat doesn't want to bind you to color stories or to particular formulas. She wants you to experiment with all of it at the same time. And now that I've experienced her palettes, I've come to appreciate why these toppery glitter shades are there and why they're never going to be released as an eyeshadow palette of their own. Because they're meant to be used with the rest of the shades in her eyeshadow palettes. They're meant to add complexity, they're meant to add something different, and they're meant to be layered over top of each other, which is why we will never see, I think, an eyeshadow palette with only the glitter topper shades from Pat McGrath. I hope you enjoyed my little countdown and a few thoughts on all of the eyeshadow palettes that I bought in 2018. Like I said, going forward into next year, I hope that I'm going to slow down and not show you another 20 palettes next year. Let's see, I think I can pull that off. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you in my next video. Bye!